Здравствуйте, my fair weather friends, and welcome back to another episode of Kachimuchi's Game and Spooks. On today's episode, I'd like to try a little something different. I will be narrating a mystery creepypasta. As much as I do enjoy classic creepypastas, even I have to admit that well is going to run dry eventually. If and when that day comes, I'll either have to pursue this whole mystery creepypasta thing or have to peruse Reddit for their no-sleep posts. I think it's clear to see which one I'd prefer to do. Also, just as a disclaimer, this story is going to be narrated with a Scottish accent. And incidentally, I am not Scottish, so I'm going to have to try and do my best. I hope it isn't too offensive to your ears, and I hope you'll be able to enjoy the story, regardless. And so, without any further ado, let us begin the mystery creepypasta, which I've decided to title Long-Term Survivor. I first meet Ellen Ventels through the HIV and positive self-help group, although he wasn't part of that group for long. Ventels didn't look after himself very well, and soon developed one of the many opportunistic infections we are prone to. I always find the term opportunistic infection amusing. In our culture, it seems to invoke some admirable quality. I think of the opportunism of the entrepreneur who spots a gap in the market, or of that striker in the penalty box. Tricky buggles, those opportunistic infections. The members of the group were in a roughly similar medical condition. We were all antibody positive, but still largely asymptomatic. Paranoia was never far from the surface at our meetings. Everybody seemed to be furtively checking out everyone else's lymph glands for signs of swelling. It was disconcerting to feel people's eyes stray to the side of your face during conversation. This type of behavior added further to the sense of unreality which hung over me at the time. I really couldn't conceive of what had happened to me. The test results at first just seemed unbelievable, so incongruous with the healthy way I felt and looked. Part of me remained convinced that there had to have been a mistake, in spite of taking the test 3 times. My self-delusion should have been shattered when Donna refused to see me, but it was always hanging on in the background with a grim resolution. We always seem to believe what we want to believe. I stopped going to the group meetings after they put Alan Ventels in the hospice. It just depressed me, and anyway, I wanted to spend my time visiting him. Tom, my key worker, and one of the group counselors, reluctantly accepted my decision. Look, Dave, I think that you seeing Alan in hospital is really great. For him. I'm more concerned about you at the moment, though. You're in great health, and the purpose of the group is to encourage us to make the most of things. We don't stop living just because we're HIV positive. Poor Tom. His first faux pas of the day. Is that the royal we, Tom? When you're HIV positive, tell me all about it. Tom's healthy pink cheeks flushed. He couldn't help it. Years of intensive interpersonal skills practice had taught him to hide the nervy visual and verbal giveaways. No shifty eye contact or quavering voice for him in the face of embarrassment. Not old Tom. Unfortunately, Tom couldn't do a thing about the glowing red smears which rushed up the side of his face on such occasions. I'm sorry, Tom apologized assertively. He had the right to make mistakes. He always said that people had that right. Try telling that to my damaged immune system. I'm just concerned that you're choosing to spend your time with Alan. Watching him wasting away won't be good for you. And besides, Alan was hardly the most positive member of the group. He certainly was the most HIV positive member. Tom chose to ignore my remark. He had a right not to respond to the negative behavior of others. We all had such a right, he told us. I liked Tom. He plowed a lonely furrow, always trying to be positive. I thought that my job, which involved watching slumbering bodies being opened up by the cruel scalpel of Howison, was depressing and alienating. It's a veritable picnic, however, compared to watching souls being wrenched apart. That was what Tom had to put up with at the group meetings. Most members of HIV and Positive were intravenous drug users. They picked up HIV from the shooting galleries, which flourished in the city in the mid-80s after Bread Street surgical suppliers were shut down. That stopped the flow of fresh needles and syringes. After that, it was large communal syringes and share alike. I've got a mate called Tommy, who also started using smack through hanging around with some of these guys in Leith. One of them I know, a guy called Mark Renton, who I worked with back in my chippy days. It's ironic that Mark has been shooting smack for years, and is, so far as I know, still no infected with HIV, while I've never touched the stuff in my life. There were, however, enough smackheads present in the group to make you realize that he could be the exception, rather than the rule. Group meetings were generally tense affairs. The junkies resented the two homosexuals in the group. They believed that HIV originally spread into the city's drug-using community through an exploitative bifty landlord who fucked his sick junkie tenants for the rent. Myself and two women, one of the non-drug using partner of a junk addict, resented everyone, as we were neither homosexual nor junkies. At first, I, like everyone else, believed that I had been innocently infected. It was all too easy to blame the smackheads or the beefy boys at that time. However, I had seen the posters and read the leaflets. I remember in the punk era, the Sex Pistols saying that no one is innocent. Too true. What also has to be said, though, is that some are more guiltier than others. This brings me back to Ventals. I gave him a chance to show repentance. This was a sight more than the bastard deserved. At a group session, I told the first of several lies, the trail of which would lead to my grip on the soul of Alan Ventals. I told the group that I had had unprotective, penetrative sex with people knowing full well that I was HIV positive, and that I now regretted it. The room went deathly silent. People shifted nervously in their seats. Then a woman called Linda began to cry, shaking her head. Tom asked her if she wanted to leave the meeting. She said no. She would wait and hear what people had to say, venomously addressing her reply in my direction. I was largely oblivious to her anger, though. I never took my eyes off Ventals. He had that characteristic, perpetually bored expression on his face. I was sure a faint smile briefly played across his lips. That was a very brave thing to say, Davy. I'm sure it took a lot of courage, Tom said solemnly. No, really, you dose prick. It was a fucking lie. I shrugged. I'm sure a terrific burden of guilt has been lifted from you, Tom continued, raising his brows and inviting me to come in. I accepted the opportunity this time. Yes, Tom, just to be able to share it with you all. It's terrible. I don't expect people to forgive. The other woman in the group, Marjorie, directed a sneering insult towards me, which I didn't quite catch, while Linda continued crying. No reaction was forthcoming from the cunt who sat in the chair opposite me. His selfishness and lack of morality sickened me. I wanted to take him apart with my bare hands there and then. I fought to control my senses, savoring the richness of my plan to destroy him. The disease could have his body. That was its victory, whatever malignant force it was. Mine would be a greater one, a more crushing one. I wanted his spirit. I planned to carve moral wounds into his supposedly everlasting soul. Amen. Tom looked around the circle. Does anyone empathize with Davy? How do people feel about this? After a bout of silence, during which my eyes stayed trained on the impassive figure of Vettles, wee Gogsy, a junkie in the group, started to croak nervously. Then he blurted out in a terrible rant what I had been waiting from Vettles. I'm glad Davy says that. I did the same. I did the fucking same. An innocent lassie that never did a fucking thing to nobody. I just hated the world. I mean, I thought, how the fuck should I care? What have I got for life? I'm 23, and I've had nothing. Not even a fucking job. Why should I care? When I told the lassie, she just freaked. He sobbed like a child. Then he looked up at us and produced, through his tears, the most beautiful smile I have ever seen on anyone in my life. But it was alright. She took the test 3 times over 6 months. Nothing. She wasn't infected. Marjorie, who was in the same circumstances, was infected, hissed at us. Then it happened. That cunt Vettles rolled his eyes and smiled at me. That did it. That was the moment. The anger was still there, but it was fused with a great calmness, a powerful clarity. I smiled back at him, feeling like a semi-submerged crocodile eyeing a soft furry animal drinking at the river's edge. No, wee Gogsy whined piteously at Marjorie. It wasn't like that. Waiting for the test results was worse than waiting for my own. You didn't understand. I didn't. I didn't. It's no like. Tom came to the aid of the quivering, inarticulate mass he'd become. Let's not forget the tremendous anger, resentment, and bitterness that you all felt when you learned you were antibody positive. This was the cue for one of our customary ongoing series of arguments to shunt into full gear. Tom saw it as dealing with our anger by confronting reality. The process was supposed to be therapeutic, and indeed it seemed to be for many of the group, but I found it exhausting and depressing. Perhaps this was because, at the time, my personal agenda was different. Throughout this debate on personal responsibility, Vettles, as was typical on such occasions, made his customary helpful and enlightening contribution. Shite, he exclaimed, whenever someone made a point with passion. Tom would ask him, as he always did, why he felt that way. Just do, Vettles replied with a shrug. Tom asked if he could explain why. It's just one person's view against the others. Tom responded by asking Alan what his view was. Alan either said, I'm not bothered, or I don't give a fuck. I forget his exact words. Tom then asked him why he was here. Vettel said, I'll go then. He left and the atmosphere instantly improved. It was as if someone he had done a vile and odious fart had somehow sucked it back up their arsehole. He came back though, as he always did, sporting that sneering, gloating expression. It was as if Vettles believed that he alone was immortal. He enjoyed watching others trying to be positive, and then deflating them. Never blatantly enough to get kicked out of the group, but enough to significantly lower its morale. The disease which racked his body was a sweetheart compared to the more obscure one that possessed his sick mind. Ironically, Vettles saw me as a kindled spirit, unaware that my sole purpose of attending the meetings was to scrutinize him. I never spoke in the group, and perfected a cynical look when anyone else did. Such behavior provided a basis on which I was able to pile up with Alan Ventles. It had been easy to befriend this guy. Nobody else wanted to know him. I simply became his friend by default. We started drinking together, him recklessly, me carefully. I began to learn about his life, accumulating knowledge steadily, thoroughly, and systematically. I had done a degree in chemistry at Strathclyde University, but I never approached my studies of the subject with anything like the rigor or enthusiasm with which I approached the study of Vettels. Vettels had got HIV infection, like most people in Edinburgh, through the sharing of needles while taking heroin. Incidentally, prior to being diagnosed HIV positive, he had kicked the junk, but was now a hopeless pisshead. The way he drank indiscriminately, occasionally stuffing a pub roll or toasty into his face during a marathon of drinking bout, meant that his weakening frame was easy prey to all sorts of potentially killer infections. During his period of socializing with me, I confidently prophesied that he would last no time. That was how it turned out. A number of infections was soon coursing through his body. This made no difference to him. Vettels carried on behaving as the way he had always done. He started to attend the hospice, or the unit, as they called it, first as an outpatient, then with a birth of his very own. It always seemed to be raining when I made that journey to the hospice. A wet, freezing, persistent rain, with winds that cut through your layers of clothing like an X-ray. Chills equal colds, and colds can equal death. But this meant little to me at the time. Now, of course, I look after myself. Then, however, I had an all-encompassing mission. There was work to be done. The hospice building is not unattractive. They have faced over the grey blocks with some nice yellow brickwork. There is no yellow brick approach road to the place, however. Every visit to Alan Ventel's brought my last one and my final revenge closer to hand. The point soon came when there was no time left to try and elicit heartfelt apologies from him. At one stage, I thought that I wanted repentance from Vettels more than revenge for myself. If I got it, I would have died with the belief in the fundamental goodness of the human spirit. The shriveled vessel of skin and bone, which contained the life force of Vettels, seemed to be an inadequate home for a spirit of any sort, let alone one in which to invest your hopes for humanity. However, a weakened, decaying body was supposed to bring the spirit closer to the surface, and make it more apparent to we mortals. That was what Gillian from the hospital where I worked once told me. Gillian was very religious, and it suits her to believe that. We all see what we want to see. What did I really want? Perhaps it was always revenge, rather than repentance. Ventels could have blabbed for forgiveness like a greeting-faced bairn. It might not have been enough to stop me from what I planned to do. This internal discoursing is a byproduct of all that counselling I got for Tom. He emphasized basic truths. You are not dying yet. You have to live your life until you are. Underpinning them was the belief in that grim reality of impending death can be talked away by trying to invest in the present reality of life. I didn't believe that at the time, but now I do. By definition, you have to live until you die. Better to make that life as complete and enjoyable an experience as possible, in case death is shite, which I suspect it will be. The nurse at the hospital looked a bit like Gail, a woman I'd once gone out with, pretty disastrously as it happens. She wore the same cool expression on her face. In her case, she had good reason, as I recognized it as one of professional concern. In Gail's case, such detachment was, I feel, inappropriate. This nurse looked at me in that strange, serious, and patronizing way. Alan's very weak. Please don't stay too long. I understand, I smiled, benign and somber. As she was playing the caring professional, I thought that I had better play the concerned friend. I seemed to be playing the part quite well. He's very fortunate to have such a good friend, she said, obviously perplexed that such a bastard abomination could have any friends. I grunted something non-committal and moved into the small room. Alan looked terrible. I was worried sick, gravely concerned that this bastard might not last a week, that he might escape the terrible destiny I'd carved out for him. The timing had to be right. It had given me a great pleasure, at the start, to witness Ventel's great physical agony. I will never let myself get into a state like that when I get sick. Fuck that. I'll leave that engine running in the lock-up garage. Ventel's, shite that he is, did not have the guts to leave the gig of his own accord. He'd hang on to the grim end, if only to maximise the inconvenience to everybody. Alright, Al, I asked him. A silly question, really. Convention always imposes its lunacy on us at such inappropriate times. No bad, he wheezed. Are you quite sure there, Alan, dear boy? Nothing wrong? You look a wee bit peaky. Probably just a touch of this bug that's doing the rounds. Straight to bed with a couple of aspirins, and you'll be right as rain tomorrow. Any pain? I asked hopefully. No, they got drugs. Just my breathing. I held his hand. I felt a twinge of amusement as his pathetic bony fingers squeezed tightly. I thought I was going to laugh in his skeleton face as his tired eyes kept shutting. Alas, poor Alan, I knew him, nurse. He was a wanker, an infinite pest. I watched, stifling smirks, as he groped for breath. "'S right, mate. I'm here," I said. "You're a good guy, Davy," he spluttered. "Pity we never knew each other before this." He opened his eyes and shut them again. "It was a fucking pity, alright, you trashed-faced little cunt," I hissed at his closed eyes. What? What was that?" He was delirious with fatigue and drugs. Lazy cunt. Spends too much time in that stretcher. Should get off his hole for a wee bit of exercise. A quick jog around the park, 50 press-ups, 24 squat thrust. I said, it's a shame we had to meet under such circumstances. He groaned contentedly and fell into his sleep. I extracted his scrawny fingers from my hand. Unpleasant dreams, cunt. The nurse came back in to check on my man. Most antisocial. Hardly the way to treat a guest. I smiled, looking down on the slumbering near corpse that was Venter's. She forced a nervous laugh, probably thinking it's the black humour of the homosexual or the junkie, or the hemophiliac, or whatever she imagines me to be. I don't give a toss about her perception of me. I see myself as the avenging angel. Killing this shitebag would only do him a big favour. That was the problem, but one which I managed to resolve. How do you help a man who's going to die soon, knows it, and doesn't give a toss? Talking, but more crucially, listening to Ventals. I found out how. You help them through the living, through the people they care for. The song says that everybody loves somebody sometime, but Ventals seemed to defy that generalization. The man just did not like people, and they more than reciprocated. We other men, Ventals saw himself in an adversarial role. Past acquaintances were described with bitterness, a rip-off merchant, or derision, a fucking sap. The description employed depended on who had abused, exploited, or manipulated whom on the particular occasion in question. Women fell into two indistinct categories. They either had a fanny like a fish supper, or a fanny like a burst couch. Vettles evidently saw little in the women beyond the furry hole, as he called it. Even some disparaging remarks about their tits or asses were represented a considerable broadening of vision. I got despondent. How could this bastard ever love anybody? I gave it time, however, and patience reaped its reward. Despicable shite though he was, Vettles did care for one person. There was no mistaking the change in his conversational tone when he employed the phrase, "the wee felly." I discreetly pumped him for information about the 5-year-old son he had had by this woman in Wester Hiles. A coup who would not let him see the child, named Kevin. Part of me loved this woman already. The child showed me how Vittles could be hurt. In contrast to his normal bearing, he was stricken with pain and incoherent with sentiment when he talked about how he'd never see his son grow up, about how much he loved their wee felly. That was why Vittles did not fear death. He actually believed that he would live on, in some sense or another, through his son. It hadn't been difficult to insinuate myself into the life of Frances, Ventel's ex-girlfriend. She hated Ventels with a vitriol, which endeared her to me, even though I wasn't attracted to her in any other way. After checking her out, I cruised her, accidentally on purpose, at a trashy disco, where I played the role of a charming and attentive suitor. Of course, money was no object. She was soon well into it, obviously having never been treated decently by a man in her life, and she wasn't used to cash, living on the breadline with a kid to bring up. The worst part was when it came to sex. I insisted, of course, on wearing a condom. She had, prior to us getting to that stage, told me about Vettles. I nobly said that I trusted her and would be prepared to make love via a condom, but I wanted to remove the element of uncertainty from her mind. And I had to be honest, I'd been with a few different people. Given her past experiences with Vettles, such doubts were bound to be present. When she started to cry, I thought I had blown it. Her tears were due to gratitude, however. "You're really a nice person, Davy. Do you ken that?" she said. If she knew what I was going to do, she wouldn't have held such a lofty opinion. It made me feel bad, but whenever I thought of Ventals, the feeling evaporated. I would go through with it alright. I timed my courtship of Francis to coincide with Vettel's decline into serious illness and his attendant incapacity in the hospice. A number of illnesses were in the frame to finish Vettels, the leader of the field, being pneumonia. Vettels, in common with a lot of HIV-infected punters who take the junk route, escaped the horrible skin cancers more prevalent among gays. The main rival to his pneumonia was the prolific thrush which went into his stomach and throat. Thrush was not the first thing to want to choke the living shite out of the bastard, but it could be the last, unless I moved quickly. His decline was very rapid, at one stage too rapid for my liking. I thought that the cunt would cash in his chips before I could execute my plan. My opportunity came, in any event, at exactly the right time. In the end, it was probably 50-50 luck and planning. Vettles was struggling, no more than a wrinkled parcel of skin and bone. The doctor had said, "Any day now." I had got Frances to trust me with the babysitting. I encouraged her to get out with her friends. She was planning to go out for a curry on the Saturday night, leaving me alone in her flat with the kid. I would take the opportunity presented to me. On the Wednesday before the big day, I decided to visit my parents. I had thought of telling them about my medical condition, and knew it would probably be my last visit. My parents' home was a flat in Oxgangs. The place had always seemed so modern to me when I was a kid. Now it looks strange, a shantytown relic of a bygone era. The old girl answered the door. For a second she looked tentative. Then she realized it was me and not my younger brother, and therefore her purse could be kept in mothballs. She welcomed me, her enthusiasm generated by relief. "Hello, stranger," she sung, ushering me in with haste. I noted the reason for the hurry. Coronation Street was on. Mike Baldwin had apparently reached a point where he had to confront live-in lover Alma Sedgwick and tell her that he was really into rich widow Jackie Ingram. Mike couldn't help it. He was a prisoner of love, a force external to him, which compelled him to behave in the way he did. I could, as Tom would have put it, empathize. I was a prisoner of hate, a force which was an equally demanding taskmaster. I sat down on the couch. "Hello, stranger," my old man repeated, not even looking at me from behind his evening news. "What have you been up to, then?" he asked wearily. "Nothing much." "Nothing really, Pater. Oh, did I mention I'm antibody positive? It's very fashionable now, you know. One must simply have a damaged immune system these days." 2 million chinkies. 2 million of the buggles. That's what we're going to have over here when Hong Kong goes back to China. He let out a long exhalation of breath. 2 million wee willy winkies, he mused. I said nothing, refusing to rise to the bait. Ever since I'd gone to university, jacking in on what my parents habitually described as a good trade, the old man had cast himself as the hard-nosed reactionary to my student revolutionary. At first it had been a joke, but with the passing years, I grew out of my role, and he began to embrace his more firmly. "You're a fascist. It's all to do with inadequate penis size," I told him cheerfully. Coronation Street's vice-like grip on my ma's psyche was broken briefly, as she turned to us with a knowing smirk. "Dinna talk bloody nonsense. I've proved my manhood, son," he belligerently replied, digging at the fact that I'd managed to reach the age of 25 without obtaining a wife or producing children. For a second I even thought that he was going to pull out his cock and try and prove me wrong. Instead, he shrugged off my remark and returned to his chosen theme. "How'd you like 2 million chinkies in your street?" I thought of the term chinky, and visualized loads of aluminium cartons of half-eaten food lying in my road. It was an easy image to call to mind, as it was a scene I observed every Sunday morning. "It sometimes seems like I already have," I thought out loud. "There you are, then," he said, as if I'd conceded a point. "Another 2 million are on their way. How'd you like that?" "Presumably the whole 2 million won't move into Caledonian Place. I mean, conditions are cramped enough in the Derry ghetto as it is. Loaf if you like. What about jobs? 2 million on the dole already. Houses? Oh, they poor buggers living in Cardboard City." God, he was nipping at my heat. Thankfully, the mighty Ma, guardian of the soapbox, intervened. "Shut up, Willies. I'm trying to watch the telly." "Oh, sorry, Mater. I know it's a trifle self-indulgent of me, your HIV offspring, to crave your attention, when Mike Baldwin is making an important choice which will determine his future. Which grotesque old hangout will the shriveled post-menopausal slag want to shaft? Stay tuned." I decided not to mention my HIV. My parents don't have very progressive views on such things. Or maybe they do. Who knows? At any rate, it just did not feel right. Tom always tells us to keep in tune with our feelings. My feelings were that my parents married at 18 and already had 4 screaming brats by the time they were my age. They think I'm queer already. Bringing AIDS into the picture will only serve to confirm this suspicion. Instead, I drank a can of export and quietly talked football with the old man. He hasn't been to a game since 1970. Colour television has gone for his legs. 20 years later, the satellite came and fucked him up completely. Nevertheless, he still regarded himself as an expert on the game. The opinions of others were worthless. In any event, it was a waste of time attempting to venture them. As with politics, he'd eventually come around to the opposite viewpoint from the one he'd previously advocated, and express it just as stridently. All you needed to do was put up no hard front for him to argue against, and he'd gradually talk himself around to your way of thinking. I sat for a while, nodding intently. Then I made up some banal excuse and left. I returned home and checked my toolbox, a former Chippy's collection of various sharp implements. On Saturday, I took her round to Francis's flat in Wester Hiles. I had a few odd jobs to do. One of them she knew nothing about. Fran had been looking forward to the meal out with her pals. She talked incessantly as she got ready, I tried to respond beyond a series of low groans which sounded like aye and right, but my mind was spinning with thoughts of what I had to do. I sat hunched and tense on the bed, frequently rising to the window to peer out as she put her face on. After what seemed like a lifetime, I heard the sound of a motor rolling into the deserted, shabby car park. I sprang to the window, cheerfully announcing, "Taxi's here." Frances left me in custody of her sleeping child. The whole operation went smoothly enough. Afterwards, I felt terrible. Was I any better than Vetters? Wee Kevin. We had some good times together. I had taken him to the shows at the Meadows Festival, to Kirkcaldy for the League Cup tie, and to the Museum of Childhood. While it doesn't seem like a great deal, it was a sight more than his old boy ever did for the poor wee bastard. Francis said as much to me. Bad as I felt then, it was only a foretaste of the horror that hit me when I developed the photographs. As the prints formed into clarity, I shook with fear and remorse. I put them on the dryer and made myself a coffee, which I used to wash down 2 Valium. Then I took the prints and went to the hospice to visit Ventals. Physically, there was not a great deal of him left. I felt the worst when I looked into his glazed eyes. Some people with AIDS had been developing pre-senile dementia. The disease could have his body. If it had also taken his mind, it would deprive me of my revenge. Thankfully, Vettel soon registered my presence. His initial lack of response was probably a side effect of the medication he was on. His eyes soon fixed on me in their gaze, acquiring the sneaky, furtive look I associated with him. I could feel his contempt for me oozing out his sickly smile. He thought he'd found a sappy cunt to indulge him until the end. I sat with him, holding his hand. I felt like snapping off his scrawny fingers and sticking them into his orifices. I blamed him for what I had to do to Kevin, as well as all the other issues. "You're a pretty good guy, Davy. Pity we didn't meet in different circumstances," he wheezed, repeating that well-worn phrase he'd used in all my visits. I tightened my grasp on his hand. He looked at me uncomprehendingly. Good. The bastard could still feel physical pain. It wasn't going to be that kind of pain that would hurt him, but it was a nice extra. I spoke in clear, measured tones. "I told you I got infected through shooting up Al. Well, I lied. I lied to you about tons of things." "Oh, so this, Davy." "Just listen a minute, Al. I got infected through this bird I've been seeing. She didn't ken that she was with HIV. She got infected by a piece of shite that she met one night in a pub. She was a bit pissed and a bit naive, this wee bird ken. This cunt says that he had a wee bit of dope back at his gaff, so she went with the cunt back to his flat. The bastard raped her. Ye ken what he did, Al. 254. "Davy, what is this?" "I'll fucking tell ye. Threatened her with a fucking blade. Tied her down. Fucked her fanny. Fucked her arse. Made her go down on him. The lassie was terrified, as well as being hurt. Does this sound familiar then, cunt?" I didn't ken what the fuck you're on about, Davy." "Dinna fucking start. You remember Donna. You remember the Southern Bar." I was fucked up, man. You remember what you says?" "That was lies. Bullshit. I couldn't have got a fucking root on if I had had that shite in my cum. I couldn't have raised a fucking smile." "We Gogsy, mind of him?" Shit your fucking mouth. Wee Gogsy took his fucking chance. You sat there like it was a fucking pantomime when you had yours, I rasped, watching drops of my gob disseminate into the film of sweat which covered his shrunken coupon. I composed myself, continuing my story. The lassie went through a heavy time. She was strong-willed though. It would have fucked up a lot of women. But Donna tried to shrug it off. Why let one spunk-gobbed cunt ruin your life? Easier said than done, but she did it. What she didn't ken was that the scumbag in question was HIV positive. Then she meets this other guy. They hit it off. He likes her, but he kens that she's got problems with men and sex. Nae fucking wonder, eh? I wanted to strangle the perverse force which passed for life out of the cunt's body. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet, you doss fucker. I drew a heavy breath and continued my tale, reliving the horror of it. They walked it out, this lassie and this other guy. Things were barry for a bit. Then she discovered that the rapist fuckbag was HIV. Then she discovered that she was. But what was worse for this person, a real person, a fucking moral person, was when she found out that her new filly was, all because of you, the rapist cunt. I was the new filly. Me. Big fucking sap here. I pointed to myself. Davy, I'm sorry, man. What can I say? You've been a good mate. It's that disease. It's a fucking horrible disease, Davy. It kills the innocent, Davy. It kills the innocent. It's too late for that shite now. You had your chance at the time, like wee Gogsy. He laughed in my face. It was a deep wheezing sound. So what are you gonna do about it? Kill me? Go ahead. You'd be doing us a favour. I didn't give a fuck. His wizened death mask seemed to become animated, to fill with a strange, ugly energy. This was not a human being. Obviously, it suited me to believe that. Made it easier to do what I had to do. But in the cold light of day, I believe it still. It was time to play my cards. I calmly produced the photographs from inside my pocket. It's not so much what I'm gonna do about it, mere what I've already have done about it. I smiled, dragging the expression of perplexed fear which etched into his face. What's this? What do you mean? I felt wonderful. Shockwaves tripped over him, his scrawny head oscillating as his mind grappled with his greatest fears. He looked at the photographs in terror, unable to make them out, wondering what dreadful secrets they held. Think of the worst possible thing I could do to make you pissed off, Al. Then multiply it by 1,000, and you're not even fucking close. I shook my head mournfully. I showed him a photograph of myself and Francis. We were posing confidently, casually displaying the arrogance of lovers in their first flush. What the fuck? He spluttered, trying pathetically to pull his scrawny frame up in the bed. I thrust my hand to his chest and effortlessly pushed him back home. I did this slowly, savoring my power and his impotence in that one glorious motion. Relax, Al, relax. Unwind. Loosen up a little. Take it easy. Remember what the doctors and nurses say. You need your rest. I flipped the first photo over, exposing the next picture to him. That was Kevin that took the last picture. Takes a good 40 for a wee laddie, eh? There he is, the wee felly. The next photograph showed Kevin, dressed in a Scotland football strip, on my shoulders. What have you fucking done? It was a sound. Rather, it was a voice that seemed to come from an unspecific part of his decaying body, rather than his mouth. The unearthliness of it stung me, but I made the effort to continue sounding nonchalant. Basically, this. I produced the third photo. It showed Kevin, bound to a kitchen chair. His head hung heavily to one side, and his eyes were closed. Had Vettles looked at the detail, he may have noticed a bluish tint on his son's eyelids and lips, and the almost clownish whiteness of his complexion. It's almost certain that Vettles noticed the dark wounds on his head, chest, and knees, and the blood which oozed from them, covering his body, at first making it hard to note that he was naked. The blood was everywhere. It covered the lino in a dark puddle under Kevin's chair. Some of it shot outward across the kitchen floor in squatted trails. An assortment of power tools, including a Bosch drill and a Black & Decker sander, in addition to various sharpened knives and screwdrivers, were laid out in the feet of the upright body. No, Kevin, for God's sake, no. He done nothing. He hurt nobody. No. He moaned on, an ugly, whinging sound devoid of hope or humanity. I gripped his thin hair crudely and wrenched his head up from the pillow. I observed in perverse fascination as the bony skull seemed to sink to the bottom of the loose skin. I thrust the picture in his face. I thought that young Kev should be just like Daddy. So when I got bored of fucking your old girlfriend, I decided I'd give wee Kev up on his, tradesman entrance. I thought, if HIV's good enough for Daddy, it's good enough for his brat. Kevin, he groaned on. Unfortunately, his asshole was a bit too tight for me, so I had to extend it in a place with a masonry drill. And sadly, I got a wee bit carried away and started making holes all over the place. It's just that he reminded me so much of you, Al. I'd love to say it was painless, but I can't. At least it was relatively quick. Quicker than rotting away in a bed. It took him about 20 minutes to die. 20 screaming, miserable minutes. Poor Kev. As you says, Al, it's a disease which kills the innocent. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He kept saying no, over and over again, in low, choking sobs. His head jerked in my grip. Worried that the nurse would come, I pulled one of the pillows from behind him. The last words wee Kevin says was, Daddy. That was your parents' last words, Al. Sorry, pal. Daddy's away. That was what I told him. Daddy's away. I looked straight into his eyes, all pupils, just a black void of fear and total defeat. I pushed his head back down and put the pillow over his face, stifling the sickening moans. I held it firmly down and pressed my head on it, half gasping, half singing the paraphrased words of an old Boney M song. Daddy cool. Daddy cool. You've been a fucking fool. Bye bye, Daddy cool. I merrily sung until Ventel's feeble resistance subsided. Keeping the pillow firmly over his face, I pulled a Penthouse magazine off his locker. The bastard would have been too weak to even turn the pages, let alone raise a wank. However, his homophobia was so strong that he probably kept it on display to make some absurd statement about his sexuality. Rotting away, and his greatest concern is that nobody thinks he's a bifty. I set the magazine on the pillow and thumbed through it in a leisurely manner before taking Vettel's pulse. Nothing. He'd checked out. More importantly, he'd done it in a state of tortured, agonized misery. Taking the pillow off the corpse, I pulled its ugly, frail head forward, then let it fall back. For a few minutes I contemplated what I saw before me. The eyes were open, as was the mouth. It looked stupid, a sick caricature of a human being. I suppose that's what corpses are, mind you. Vettel's always was. My searing scorn quickly gave way to a surge of sadness. I couldn't quite determine why that should have happened. I looked away from the body. After sitting for another couple of minutes, I went to tell the nurse that Venables had left the stadium. I attended Ventel's funeral at Seafield Crematorium with Frances. It was an emotional time for her, and I felt obligated to lend support. It was never an event destined to break any attendance records. His mother and sister showed up, as did Tom, with a couple of puddles from HIV and positive. The minister could find little decent to say about Vettels, and, to his credit, he didn't bullshit. It was a short and sweet performance. Alan had made many mistakes in his life, he said. Nobody was contradicting him. Alan would, like all of us, be judged by God. He would grant him salvation. It is an interesting notion, but I feel that the gaffer in the sky has a fair bit of graft ahead of him if that bastard's checked in up there. If he has, I think I'll take my chances in the other place. Thank you very much. Outside, I checked out the reeds. Vettels had only one. Alan, Love Mum, and Sylvia. To my knowledge, they had never visited him in the hospice. Very wise of them. Some people are easier to love when you don't have to be around them. I pumped the hands of Tom and the others, then took Fran and Kev for some deluxe ice cream at Lucas in Musselburgh. Obviously, I had deceived Vettels about the things I did to Kevin. Unlike him, I'm not a fucking animal. I'm far from proud about what I did do. I took great risks with the parents' well-being. Working in a hospital operating theatre, I know all about the crucial role of the anaesthetists. They're the pals that keep you alive, not sadistic fuckpigs like Howson. After the job puts you under, you're kept unconscious by the anaesthetic and put onto your life support system. All of your vital signs are monitored in highly controlled conditions. They take care. Chloroform is a much more blunt instrument, and very dangerous. I still shudder when I think of the risk I took with the wee man. Thankfully, Kevin woke up, with only a sore head and some bad dreams as a remnant of his trip to the kitchen. The joke shop and Humbrol enamel paints provided the wounds. I worked wonders with Fran's makeup and talc for Kev's death mask. My greatest cope, though, was the 3 plastic pints of blood I took from the fridge in the path lab at the hospital. I got paranoid when that fucker Howison gave me the evil eye as I walked in the corridor past him. He always does, though. I think it's because I once addressed him as Doctor instead of Mister. He's a funny cunt. Most surgeons are. You'd have to be a day that job. Like Tom's job, I suppose. Putting Kevin under turned out to be easy. The biggest problem I had was setting up and dismantling the entire scene in inside half an hour. The most difficult part involved me cleaning him up and getting him back to bed. I had to use tubs as well as water. I spent the rest of the night cleaning up the kitchen before Francis got back. It was worth the effort, however. The pictures looked authentic. Authentic enough to fuck up Ventals. Since I helped Al on his way to the great gig in the sky, life has been pretty good. Francis and I have gone our separate ways. We were never really compatible. She only really saw me as a babysitter and a wallet. For me, obviously, the relationship became largely superfluous after Vettel's death. I miss Kev more. It makes me wish that I had a kid. No, that'll never be. One thing Fran did say is that I revived her faith in men after Vettel's. Ironically, it seems as if I found my role in life, cleaning up that prick's emotional garbage. My health, touch wood, has been good. I'm still asymptomatic. I fear colds and get obsessive from time to time, but I take care of myself. Apart from the odd can of beer, I never bevy. I watch what I eat, and have a daily program of light exercises. I get regular blood checks and pay attention to my T4 count. It's still way over the crucial 800 mark. In fact, it's not gone down at all. I'm back with Donna, who inadvertently acted as the conduit for HIV between me and Ventals. We found something that we probably wouldn't have got from each other in different circumstances. Or maybe we would. Anyway, we don't analyze it, not having the luxury of time. However, I must give old Tom at the group his due. He said I'd have to work through my anger, and he was right. I took the quick route though, by sending Ventals to oblivion. Now all I get is a bit of guilt, but I can handle that. I eventually told my parents about being HIV positive. My ma just cried and held me. The old man said nothing. The colour had drained from his face as he sat and watched A Question of Sport. When he was pressed by his wailing wife to speak, he just said, "Well, there's nothing to say." He kept repeating that sentence. He never looked me in the eye. That night, back in my flat, I heard the buzzers go. Assuming it to be Donna, who had been out, I opened the stair in the house doors. A few minutes later, my old man stood in the doorway, with tears in his eyes. It was the first time he'd ever been to my flat. He moved over to me and held me in a crushing grip, sobbing and repeating, "My laddie." It felt a world or two better than, "Well, there's nothing to say." I cried loudly and unselfconsciously. As with Donna, so with my family. We have found an intimacy which may have otherwise eluded us. I wish I had not waited so long to become a human being. Better late than never, believe you me. There are some kids playing out in the back, the strip of grass illuminated with an electric green by the brilliant sunlight. The sky is a delicious clear blue. Life is beautiful. I'm going to enjoy it, and I know I'm going to have a long life. I'll be what the medical staff call a long-term survivor. I just know that I will. The end. And that was Long-Term Survivor, a mystery creepypasta, which was in fact the chapter Bad Blood from the novel Trainspotting by Irvine Welsh. This novel was more famously adapted into the 1996 movie Trainspotting, starring Ewan McGregor. In my real-life job, there is often a lot of downtime, which I've decided to spend this year by reading books, which included Trainspotting. The book by itself tells the fictional accounts of multiple characters as they exist in a circle of heroin users, and the horrifying events that occur when one of them tries to escape from the life. And if you thought my Scottish accent was the worst accent you've ever heard, then have fun reading this book. The entire thing is written in Scottish English. The chapter from the book, which I turned into a creepypasta, is unlike the other chapters in the book, as it is essentially a modern retelling of A Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, a story, and perhaps a trope, about a character who seeks vengeance against another and befriends them in order to gain their trust, and then betrays them when they least expect it. HIV/AIDS is already horrifying in and of itself, as it is a virus that doesn't kill by itself, but allows even the tiniest of illnesses to be immediately deadly. Although, unlike A Cask of Amontillado, and as noted by the narrator, when you cannot get revenge on somebody who is already dying, the only thing you can do is rob from them that which they love the most. And yeah, surprise, surprise, the ending is indeed another twist ending. Although I'd say it's all the better for it. As I was first reading this, I really did believe that the narrator killed the child, as it wouldn't be the most shocking part of the entire book, or the first time a dead child shows up as well. This is a very difficult book to read for a myriad of reasons. At any rate, thank you very much for watching or listening to this mystery installment of Kachimuchi's Game and Spooks. Why not do us a kindness and leave a like, share, or subscribe? And as always, don't be afraid to leave any recommendations for future creepypastas below. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go and get a blood test. After all, you can never be too careful these days. This has been Kochi Michi, and that's about all I have to say about that. Farewell.